Today is 27th of May and it has been 12 flat days of standoff between the Indian army and the Chinese army on the line of actual control in the Ladakh region. We have seen some cartographic disruptions carried out by Nepal, and also we have seen some clashes far up east in Sikkim in Nakula. So it started off on 5th of May when Indian troops were trying to go to their regular patrol point of Finger 4 north of Pugangso Lake, and they were stopped by the Chinese, and the troops on both the sides clashed with each other with sticks and stones like the ape man. A similar incident took place in Sikkim, where again troops on both the sides fought each other, boxed each other and pushed around at Nakula. Now all these incidents cannot be seen in isolation. They have to be clubbed together, whether it be of Sikkim or the cartographic disruptions by Nepal or what is happening in Ladakh. Well, to understand what is happening and to go over the history between India and China when it comes to intrusions, where are we heading off, what will happen to this face-off, and are we going towards a war? All these questions can be answered once we step back and look at history the way it has worked over 50 years after the 62 war. We will look at the 67 Indo-China clash. We'll look at the Samdrong-Chu Valley incident, which was actually a game changer. Then we'll talk of Doklam. We'll talk of Depsang, where we pussyfooted and gave a lot of concession to the Chinese. And then thereafter Doklam happened, and after Doklam this is what we are seeing in Galwan Valley and in Pugangso region. So let's go over what happened exactly, the sequence of events. As I mentioned, on 5th of May, 250 Indian and Chinese soldiers clashed with rods, sticks and pelted stone at each other in Pugangso Lake. Then on May 9th, 150 odd soldiers from India and China clashed with each other in a similar fashion at Nakula in Sikkim. And now Indian army is matching up with the Chinese buildup. They have brought in a lot of heavy equipment in Galwan region and pitched up a number of tents, around 100, and it is said that they have beefed up their defenses by around 5,000 troops. So Indians have also beefed up, and as we are aware that now Indians are very strong than what we were about 5-6 years back. Today we have got good infrastructure relatively, and we can move heavy equipment, be it the armor or the mech or heavy artillery, right all across from Daulat Beg Oldi right up to Demchok and way down to Chumar. So in fact this is one of the reasons why Chinese are so upset by India's belligerent, if I may say, development of infrastructure. While Chinese have done so a long back, they have got a fantastic infrastructure prevailing despite some agreements between India and China wherein you are not supposed to build infrastructure within certain limits, but they have violated that and they have built fantastic infrastructure towards their side, and there existed a huge asymmetry between the Indian and the Chinese infrastructure. Now since the time Indians have started working on their infrastructure and building it, it is creating a lot of heartburns in the Chinese, and that is why these intrusions, so-called, are aimed at basically arm twisting India into reeling back its infrastructure development projects that are underway. I must point out over here that a few years back the subsector now, that is Daulat Beg Oldie, which is bordering the Akshai chain, was absolutely air maintained. It was air maintained by strategic lift helicopter Mi-26, and regularly supplies were brought by AN-32 in that region. We definitely had a jeepable fair weather track which followed along the river Shyok, but that was of no good military use, so it made no much gain as far as Indian military is concerned. But now we have a fantastic road that connects Dobruk right up till DBO. We have a good, we have bridged this river, which is a very violent kind of a river. We have bridged it, and now we can move stuff right up till DBO. We are also in process of completing the road link between Shyok and DBO, crossing the ridge line, and so that is how we are going. We have gone much more stronger in the DBO region. Okay, so let's go over these incidents one by one. So let's first talk about Nathula. What exactly happened in 1967? Well, after 62 war, Chinese always kept pressure on Nathula. Basically, they wanted to dominate the Chumbi Valley. Chumbi Valley is like a dagger that draws into your chest and touches right up to Siliguri corridor. And Doklam, when we talk about it, then also Chumbi Valley comes into play. So Chumbi Valley is strategically extremely important to the Chinese as well as to the Indians. So when 1965 war between India and Pakistan broke out, Chinese gave an ultimatum to the Indians to vacate Nathula, to which the GOC then over there refused to heed to the Chinese and strengthen himself up along the border. That time they were not facing eyeball to eyeball as they are doing today. So this thing continued to simmer, and it was in September 1967 when the Chinese started digging in, and India, seeing the threat, the army troops started laying the barbed wire, to which Chinese stood up with the arms and confronted the Indians. There was an armed clash. India retaliated, something that Chinese never expected, and it is said that Chinese lost up to 300 to 400 of its soldiers, while India lost around 80. There were arty duels on both the sides. Indians stood ground and prevailed upon, and that is how Nathula was saved. And Nathula is held at those very positions that we fought for. And after 65, this was a turning point wherein Indians showed the Chinese that they were actually now powerful, and it was not the same as it was in 1962. Then we come to Sundarongchu Valley incident. This is again a very interesting incident that took place immediately after Srimati Indira Gandhi came back into power after emergency and after Janata Party's rule. When Srimati Indira Gandhi came back into power, she was determined to defend Tawang. And to defend Tawang, it was very essential to hold Hatungla ridge line in strength. So she accepted General Sundarji's plan that how we should hold Hatungla. And to that effect, the SSB, Service Seema Suraksha Bal as we know it today, was tasked to establish summer posts from June till September in that area along Sundarongchu. Chu means river, and dominate that area. So this thing continued for good about 2 years, 85 and 86. It 84 and 85 it went on smooth, but when it was in the summer of 86, when these guys were going to occupy their summer post, they found that there were 40 Chinese already dug in. So when this information reached New Delhi, the army started building up its strength in that area and measuring up to the Chinese. Chinese also started building up their forces, and a point came when Chinese threatened a 62 like scenario to Indians. But then, as we know, that General Sundarji was in command and he did not budge. He was in no mood to relent, and he launched Operation Checkerboard, which involved Air Force assets, moving up heavy equipment all across and building up strong defenses for Tawang. Mi-26 again was utilized. The fighters were also moved to Tejpur, and there was a huge activity in that area. That time it was called NEFA, Northern Frontiers of Arunachal. So this is how India responded, and Chinese started talking of war. They started building up their troops, and they gathered around 20,000 troops. Now we are talking of somewhere September of 87 that this is happening, and India is standing firm. India is not budging, and India, as a reply to the Chinese, declared Arunachal as a full integrated state of India, which changed the dynamics of the whole case. So this is how it continued, and it was in 87 when Natwar Singh was going to Seoul, the North Korea. He stopped over and he spoke about resolving the issues bilaterally by talking and diplomatically. And that was a time when almost 1 year had passed to the standoff. The Chinese thought that I think it was a good idea, and India and Indians and the Chinese held a number of flag meetings, and thereafter both the sides disengaged to previous locations, and that is how that crisis came to an end. And when Rajiv Gandhi visited China in 88, he sat there talking to the Chinese premier as equal and not as somebody who had lost, who was representing a country who was badly humiliated in 1962, but he was representing a nation with a very strong will and a very strong army. So this is how it panned out in Sundarong Chu. Let's not forget that it lasted for far more than 1 year, and the Western media spoke about a war, impending war clouds and things like that, but then nothing of that sort happened, because Chinese are very, very smart people. They are not like what we see to our west. They are not like that. They are very intelligent people, and they will not get into something in which they have something to lose. So they will not venture into that kind of a situation. Now, after this, I would like to talk about the Dapsang intrusion. Dapsang intrusion took place in the same general area where we are talking of Galwan standoffs. This intrusion took place 30 kilometers south of DBO, wherein the Chinese came in, pitched up their tents, and it is said that they came in around 15 kilometers inside the Indian territory, and that was an intrusion. And unfortunately, the dispensation then, if you recall how Salman Khurshid had said that it is like this intrusion is like a small acne on a beautiful girl's cheek, so it's not a major issue. So that is how we looked at, and army also pussyfooted, because of course the directions were not forthcoming of that nature, and as a result, what Chinese were quite upset about, that India had built in some structures, some bunkers in Chumar sector, and they had established some radars on top looking into the Chinese. So they asked India to dismantle all these things that they had come up with, and India had to agree and give concession to the Chinese before Chinese withdrew from Depsang. Now, after Depsang, it was Doklam. As we all know, it's a tri-junction between Bhutan, Sikkim, and Tibet, where the borders meet. So, this particular incident took place on the Bhutanese side. It was not on the Indian side, but Bhutan is a very close ally, and we are duty bound to provide for its defense. So, when Chinese were coming up close to the ridge line on the inside the Bhutanese territory, now let me tell you, if they had got onto that ridge line, then they would have peeked into the Chumbi Valley and looked straight over the Chicken's Neck. That would have been a very significant strategic loss, something that we saw in 1967. Had we lost Nathula, then Chinese would have easily rolled into Chumbi Valley and threatened the Chicken's Neck. So, but here, Siliguri corridor, but here in this case, they were trying to maneuver it from the Bhutanese side. So Indians took a very prompt decision, and Indian forces moved up. They crossed the Indian border and took up position on the ridge line, preventing the Chinese to develop their road onto it and established permanent structure. So this is how Indians stood up to the Chinese hegemony over there, and this had very great strategic fallout. Indian image in the complete of South Asian region got very enhanced, especially amongst the ASEAN countries who were looking forward to India against the hegemonic China in the South China Sea region, and their confidence also boosted many folds. Now, after this, we see that how Chinese have come up today in the Depsang region and the Bagongso. As I mentioned earlier in the beginning, that how it all happened, the sequence of event, and why they are so pissed off. Okay, so I would like to share my personal experiences that I hold of this area in the eastern Ladakh. I was part of a battalion that was to induct for a Siachen tenure, and in those days, those battalions that were to have their tour of duty in Siachen were stationed at Tangse as part of the feeder brigade. Tangse brigade used to be known as the feeder brigade. And after we completed our Siachen tenure, we used to come back to this feeder brigade and hold defenses or hold positions in Chushul, Phukche, Demchok and Thakung area, covering a frontage of over 150 kilometers. So I remember I had taken a patrol from Tangse via Lukum and going right up to Anila Pass. Now, what used to happen, these were monthly patrols. There was a schedule and we would go as per the schedule. So when I reached, this was my first patrol in that region. So when I reached the Anila Pass after a long track, what I found was that there were few Chinese currency notes put under a stone, basically to prevent them from flying away. Some cigarette packets, some toffee wrappers, all put under stones as paperweight. And so we took photographs of that area. We picked up these telltale signs. Basically, these telltale signs are to tell that the Chinese had come here. They had, and this is their area. So we picked up these telltale signs and replaced ours over there, that is our currency note, and toffee wrappers and various Maggie packets and biscuit packets, etc., etc. We placed them right exactly under the same stones which they had used to place their telltale signs. And I remember they had developed a fantastic road that came right up till Anila Pass, just 100 odd yards short of it. and their infrastructure was so good, and I used to wonder, I wish we also had this kind of infrastructure. We wouldn't have taken 24 hours of walking all the way up to put these telltale signs. But well, that was the time, and when we came down for some reasons, we did not fall back the same day to Lukung and Tangse, and we were diverted to ITBP post, which was in the Finger area. So I stayed the night short of Finger 1 at the ITBP post over there on the northeastern banks of Pukong So. Now, after our Siachen tenure got over, then we came into Chushul, and in Chushul we had number of patrols that would go every month and do the same kind of activity that I did at Anila Pass. But here in Chushul, I was the adjutant, Chushul Garrison adjutant, and over there we also used to carry out border post meeting with the Chinese. On the other side, on the Chinese side, in their garrison, they had their adjutant, and we used to weekly talk to each other. I think, if I remember very correctly, it was Monday by around 9. Once I used to give a call to that guy over there, and then the next week he would give a call to me, and we would exchange whatever points that we had in terms of regular intrusions that took place every month as per their perspective. So this is how it used to work, and whenever there was something serious, any of the side, either of the side would call for a flag meeting, and a flag meeting was held in the BPM hut area. We have seen a lot of visuals many a times wherein the Chinese military personnel, Indian military personnel meet each other. That is the area of BPM, where we regularly have annual BPMs, and as we are talking now, there would be meetings with the Chinese trying to resolve the standoff between the Indian and the Chinese forces in Galwan region and the Pukong So. So this is how it has worked, and every year there are around 600 odd intrusions. Again, as I said, intrusion is as per perception. I perceive a line which is running from point A, B, C, D as mine, while the Chinese think that no, it is not A, B, C, D. They cross over that line and they draw another line that is E, F, G, H, which is much into my perception area, and they say that it is their line or the Chinese claimed line as it is known. So they come up to their Chinese claimed line and we call it an intrusion, and when we go up to the Indian claimed line, they call it an intrusion. So this is how it works. But recently we have seen that the Indian troops and the Chinese troops come face to face and clash with each other with sticks and clubs and fist fights, and like these nasty things are happening, chasing each other's boats in Pukong. So this has become a new normal, I would say, which happens annually now over there. And the basic reason, as I mentioned right in the beginning, is the Indian development of infrastructure, which has really troubled the Chinese, and they are quite upset about it because we have started measuring up to the Chinese build-up in that quick time frame, because we have got fantastic infrastructure. We have got airfields, airstrips coming up right there, be it DBO or Fukche or Chushul. So this is a basic reason for contention. So now the question is that what will happen? Now, as I said, as I narrated some incidents to you, of what has happened in the past, especially of Sundarongchu, wherein the standoff was a very long drawn standoff, wherein armies were quite close to fighting a war, while the complete of the world media started talking of a possible war between India and China, and things were really at the brink. We came back and things were sorted out in India's favor, of course. So seeing all these actions over past 50 years, I'm pretty confident that nothing is going to happen. And in any case, a few days back, Rajnath Singh, our defense minister, has said that he has directed the Indian armed forces to continue with the infrastructure development. So this is the Indian stand, which appears to be strong, and India is actually playing it strong. And mind you, Chinese always respect strength, and India is out there making Chinese respect that strength that we are showing. So there is just no question that we are at a defensive, we are at the back foot, like some of the media outlets are trying to portray. Well, that is totally wrong. Unfortunately, some of the veterans who are working with the media, publishing defense magazines and working for various periodicals, are also trying to portray or paint a picture wherein India is weak. Very sadly, it is their hate Modi stance which is, trying to embarrass India internationally by talking like this. Because when a veteran talks, it has a credibility, especially when you have a long media background. So that's very unfortunate that just because you hate Modi, you start undercutting India, and you start cheering up the enemy just because, as I said, that you hate Modi. So another thing that comes to everybody's mind is that while Chinese have sorted out all the border issues with all the neighboring countries, wherever their borders had dispute, in fact Chinese had a dispute with almost all the neighbors with which it shared its borders, but Chinese have sorted out with the Central Asian republics. There was a give and take, and likewise, Chinese are well settled, but it is not the case when it comes to India. So why is it that Chinese have not settled borders with India? Well, I was just mulling over and I have my own personal take as to why they are not settling issues with India on the line of actual control and the IB region of Arunachal, Sikkim, Central Sector, and the Ladakh region. Well, the reason is Tibet. Now, if you look at geography, the Tibetan plateau is, if I may say so, is right up till Ladakh. Ladakh or the Karakorams are, you can say, the western boundary of the Tibetan plateau. As far as the culture is concerned, the Leh Ladakh culture is absolutely the Tibetan culture. There you have various monasteries which follow a strict Tibetan culture, where Dalai Lama is a very revered personality. When he visits those areas, those monasteries, there is a huge jubilation kind of atmosphere in all this area. And such is the thing when you go to Spiti Valley, and likewise right in Sikkim, again Dalai Lama is very revered, and there also we have a very famous monastery like the Rumtek monastery, and they also follow the Tibetan culture up close. And when you go further beyond Sikkim into Bhutan, and then thereafter into Tawang, this is all Tibetan culture dominated. While Chinese have been suppressing the Tibetan culture over there, they are distorting the demographics by bringing in the Han Chinese. They are discouraging the Tibetans to practice their religion so freely. There are a lot of curbs on their movement and freedom. So they are quite a suppressed lot. But when it comes to India supports Dalai Lama. India supports Tibetan culture that is flourishing in these areas, as I mentioned. So by keeping the line of actual control active and alive, Chinese hold on to the option to arm twist India, and somewhere Chinese are very uncomfortable that the Tibetan culture still is living and thriving across the line of actual control onto the Indian side. If you look at the Chinese dream, if you can peep into the hearts of the Chinese, they would like to annex all these regions and bring these monasteries under its control, because it is very uncomfortable when it comes to Tibet, and it feels very threatened because of the secessionism that flows out of Lhasa and the larger sentiment that prevails in that region. So I think this is the basic reason why it has not settled down the borders or the boundary issues with India, and this is going to continue for a very long time. Chinese are not short-term guys. They look far beyond, covering decades and probably into centuries. Well, answer is definitely no. The stakes are very high. India is a large market, and Chinese would not like to disrupt that and axe their own legs by antagonizing India to that level. Then after the Wuhan virus that has spread across the world, and Chinese are seen as villain all over the world, China would definitely not like to rake up this issue to a level wherein the world gets together and rallies behind India. And as somebody had very beautifully said, that you don't fight wars with the crutches of the allies, very rightly. So India is pretty strong enough not to look for those crutches. So Chinese will not get into a kind of a armed struggle with India over these small border issues and harm itself in a very long run. So I don't think so that we'll go in for a war kind of a thing. We are not going there at all. But definitely we are going in for a very long haul, because Chinese would want India to roll back its infrastructure activities that are taking place over there, and India will definitely not do that, especially seeing the strong dispensation in the center, which is very good for military solutions. Like if you remember what happened in Depsang, when you have weak leadership, then you have Depsang and you give away a lot of concessions. But when you have strong leadership, you stand up and measure up, like we did in Sumdrongchu, like we did it in Nathula, and like we have recently done in Doklam. So I'm pretty confident that we'll stand our ground very firmly, and we'll prevail upon, and good sense will prevail. And well, whatever the long haul is, probably a month, 2 months, or a year, or maybe more, but I'm very sure that our bosses on both the sides, their bosses and our bosses, will handle the situation far more maturely. Unlikely the way it happens between India and Pakistan. We have a track record of not resorting to such kind of reactions, and I hope we get over this fast. You may like to share this video with as many of your friends as possible, and do not forget to press on to the subscribers button. Jai Hind.